Welcome back to USA Daily Report. I'm Michael Reynolds, a U.S. military analyst. Ladies and gentlemen, a brief but weighty message that President Trump sent to the Iranian people on the 13th, posted on the social media platform Truth Social, was this: help is on the way. In political language, ambiguity can sometimes carry more destructive force than direct threats. And international observers immediately asked, what does this help mean? Roughly 24 hours after that post, the answer appeared to begin taking shape through developments on the ground, with reports that the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group was moving from the South China Sea toward the Middle East. However, if we look only at military presence, we are seeing only the tip of the iceberg. The help Mr. Trump hinted at appears to be a comprehensive total package approach, using military pressure as deterrence, using economic leverage to choke off the regime's lifeline, and using psychological warfare to paralyze Tehran's allies. According to information reported by the media on the 14th and 15th, the USS Lincoln carrier strike group, previously operating in the South China Sea, received orders to change course. It is powered by 2 nuclear reactors capable of operating continuously for 50 years without refueling. This ship is a symbol of enduring power and the U.S. Navy's capacity for global deployment. But military logistics are a practical equation. Even at maximum speed, the USS Lincoln still needs at least 7 days or more to arrive at a hotspot. Publicly moving a carrier is a classic rattle-the-bushes maneuver, a political message intended to increase negotiating leverage and broaden President Trump's strategic options. That said, military experts point out that the temporary absence of a carrier on scene does not mean the United States is empty-handed in firepower. Washington still holds a network of forward bases in the UAE, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Qatar. In addition, there are strategic bombers and Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from destroyers. America's current tactics do not appear aimed at a massive ground invasion or territorial occupation, widely viewed as a past repeat of failed precedent. Instead, the objective is surgical strikes. Security sources say the list of potential targets includes the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, the core force protecting the regime, paramilitary forces involved in repression, command and control centers, military infrastructure, and ballistic missile launch platforms. This approach is designed to gradually trim Tehran's retaliatory capability without necessarily triggering an immediate full-scale war. A major question is whether the United States would apply a Maduro capture scenario to Iran's leader, Ali Khamenei. Deep analyses suggest this would be impossible in the short term. That is because Khamenei's hideout is believed to be in the city of Mashhad in the northeast, an area said to have a fortified underground tunnel system designed by the Soviet Union during the Cold War, capable of withstanding even limited nuclear strikes. To penetrate such defenses, the U.S. would have to use the 14-ton GBU-57 heavy bunker buster dropped from the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. But weapons are only a necessary condition. The sufficient condition is real-time intelligence. In a context where Iran has cut off nationwide internet access and counterintelligence forces are conducting aggressive sweeps, pinpointing Khamenei's exact coordinates would be an extreme challenge. Moreover, Trump's advisors also acknowledge that even a successful airstrike would not guarantee regime change. For a deeply entrenched theocratic system like Iran to collapse, it would require an internal uprising resonating with external pressure. And to make that pressure concrete, while the military is moving, Mr. Trump has already opened fire on the economic front. On the 12th, he declared that any country still doing business with Iran would face an additional 25% tariff when bringing goods into the United States. This is a signature blow from a president with a businessman's background: high effectiveness, low direct cost, but brutally destructive impact. The goal of this tariff strike is to eliminate the external economic oxygen keeping Tehran alive. Major partners such as China, India, and Turkey were immediately pushed into a strategic dilemma. Is it worth continuing to buy cheap Iranian oil, only to bear an additional 25% tariff when exporting goods into the U.S. market? This question is existential because oil is Iran's only remaining lifeline. Reuters, citing figures, reports that China alone absorbed more than 80% of Iran's exported oil in 2025, while other countries also serve as important links in the chain. President Trump's objective is very clear: cut off the flow of money sustaining the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. If Beijing, fearing the loss of the U.S. base, market were forced to reduce oil purchases, Iran's finances would lose their final pillar of support. Observers argue that the chaos created as Tehran runs out of cash would produce power vacuums that weaken the security network, opening the most favorable window for the U.S. military's ability to carry out a precise decapitation strike, something previously considered extremely difficult when the regime's protective apparatus still had reasons to remain loyal. This move is insidious because it targets an economy that has already lost its immunity. Iran's currency, in reality, has been sliding in despair for decades under the pressure of prior sanctions and weak governance. The reality is that even before Mr. Trump launched the 25% tariff punch, Iranians had already watched their assets evaporate at a terrifying rate. At the time of the 1979 Islamic Revolution, one U.S. dollar could be exchanged for 70 Iranian rials. By 2015, $1 equaled 30,000 rials. And by 2025, it took more than 1.4 million rials to exchange for $1. That means Iran's currency has depreciated by roughly 20,000 times in under 50 years. Hitting a record low last month triggered protests across the country, and the 25% tariff is forecast to be the jolt that could push the currency into total collapse. This leads to a major question. Why can Iran sell oil, yet the economy still craters and the currency still becomes little more than worthless paper? World Bank data for 2022 shows Iran exported up to $22 billion to China, with fuel making up more than half. But the problem lies in the kind of foreign currency Iran receives. Before sanctions, Iran sold oil and collected U.S. dollars globally, liquid money that can be spent almost anywhere. But after Iran was barred from dealing in dollars and many of its banks were removed from the international payment system SWIFT, Tehran was forced to sell oil to its largest customer, China, and accept payment in renminbi. Ironically, those funds are very difficult to transfer back to banks in Tehran. They go directly into accounts Tehran holds at smaller banks in China, typified by Bank of Kunlun, an entity sanctioned by the United States. As a result, Iran holds a large amount of renminbi but can almost never spend it outside China. This is because the currency has not been fully freely convertible. Other countries are wary and are not eager to accept it as a substitute medium of exchange or as a global store of value. Although the renminbi's international standing has shown signs of growth in recent years, in practice, it mostly circulates within bilateral transactions directly involving Beijing. In trade deals between two countries that do not involve China, this currency has almost no place. And so Iran is forced to use that renminbi balance to buy goods from China itself. According to a 2024 report by the Atlantic Council, in 2022, Iran imported machinery worth $2.12 billion and electronics worth $1.43 billion from China. Although data on financial transactions between the two countries is not accessible, there is a high probability that the high-tech goods Iran imports from China are priced in renminbi. In essence, the money flows from the pocket of a Chinese oil company to the pocket of a Chinese manufacturing company. Iran stands in the middle, receiving products from consumer goods to technology equipment instead of hard currency. If Iran wants to convert renminbi into other currencies, it can go through black market financial channels or shell companies in the UAE, Hong Kong, and Singapore, but it must accept legal sanctions risk and very high costs. Beyond buying goods, Iran can also turn oil proceeds into reserve assets. In October 2023, Iran's deputy central bank governor said the country's foreign exchange reserves were rising thanks to growth in oil and non-oil exports. However, given that China absorbs 80 to 90% of Iran's oil exports and pays in domestic currency, observers argue that a large portion of Tehran's current reserve stockpile is not U.S. dollars or gold, but is valued in renminbi. Because Iran sells resources yet does not receive real cash flow to fund public spending and pay salaries, with economic policy failing, Tehran has been forced to cover deficits by printing more money. A spiral of inflation forms, leading to today's result: $1 trading for up to 1.4 million rials. From this, we can see that President Trump's 25% tariff is not simply a trade measure. It is a pulling the firewood from under the pot move with destructive intent. A comprehensive financial collapse of Iran's government becomes only a matter of time. And in this boiling, critical moment, why would Beijing remain motionless when Iran is an important link in its geopolitical strategy? Observers suggest Chairman Xi Jinping may believe that keeping his own throne matters more than protecting Tehran as a subordinate ally. And there are several key reasons behind this assessment. The first is concern about the myth of a safe bunker. It stems from the capture of Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro. Even while hiding in a fortified underground bunker, Maduro was allegedly located to the exact meter by U.S. intelligence and military forces and taken alive. That event may have shattered Xi's sense of security and planted doubt. Have the escape routes beneath Zhongnanhai, the Qinling mountain range, and the Xishan Command Center already been fully deciphered by the United States? For a long time, the secret passages under Zhongnanhai have been the subject of intense rumor. They are said to include at least 3 escape routes. The first route connects Zhongnanhai to an Air Force base in Xishan to the west through the strategic choke point of Yukon Mountain. This site is concealed as a resort for senior officials, but in reality, it is a fortified military stronghold used for evacuation assembly. A secret tunnel more than 20 kilometers long reportedly runs straight from Zhongnanhai to this location, allowing top leaders to escape quickly in an emergency. The second route leads from Zhongnanhai to the Great Hall of the People and continues directly to Beijing Capital International Airport. That airport lies to the northeast of Zhongnanhai. The third route is more mysterious, a secret passage leading to Beijing Daxing International Airport. This project lies to the south of Zhongnanhai. It began operations in September 2019 and is said to have been personally directed and inaugurated by Xi. However, the Venezuela episode suggests that no depth is truly impenetrable. Once the coordinates are known to an adversary, these escape routes can become traps for the very people trying to flee. The second concern is the loyalty paradox within Xi's close protection unit. In Venezuela, as we know, even the protective layer of Cuban bodyguards could not protect Maduro from U.S. Special Operations Forces. Could the Zhongnanhai Protection Bureau and the Central Guard Regiment hold? These elite guards are trained to counter bullets and conventional assassins, but they have not been prepared to face suppression through superior technology. When they see comrades falling in large numbers without understanding why, or when confronted with invisible, overwhelming destructive power from above, their will to fight can collapse quickly. The third cause is the specter of internal informants creeping into the system. Many analyses argue that Maduro's rapid exposure likely involved insider leakage. In China, after waves of purges targeting senior officials such as Foreign Minister Qin Gang, Defense Minister Li Shangfu, and missile force generals' resentment within the military and government may have accumulated to a breaking point. If Xi launches a high-risk war in the Middle East or across the Taiwan Strait, opposition factions inside the military waiting for an opportunity to reverse the situation would not hesitate to employ a strategy of borrowing another's knife to kill. They could secretly provide Xi's real-time coordinates to the U.S. side to end the war and to end Xi's grand agenda as well. Concerns about internal informants gained more grounding when, on the 16th, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, publicly released a third video instructing Chinese citizens and officials on how to send secret information to the United States. This video was not a general call like the two posted in May 2025. It was described as a detailed technical guide laying out 9 steps to get around Beijing's censorship firewall. The CIA provided very meticulous guidance, beginning with acquiring a separate device in a way that avoids personal identification, then taking steps to wipe or reset it and remove pre-installed software. It also described an operational process for connecting in ways intended to reduce surveillance exposure, and it emphasized erasing traces afterward. It further described methods for reaching encrypted communication channels online and stressed procedures to avoid leaving evidence after transmitting messages. The CIA says it wants to know the truth about China. This message is, in effect, a psychological warfare strike aimed straight at mistrust within Beijing's inner circles. It plants fear that anyone around Xi, from secretaries and guards to generals, could be quietly following such a process to sell information in exchange for safety for themselves and their families. The fourth cause is a crisis of confidence in military hardware. Venezuela is one of the largest customers of China's defense industry in Latin America. Yet in the U.S. raid, the entire radar system and China-made unmanned aircraft there were reportedly completely neutralized, rendered effectively useless. This harsh reality forces Beijing to reassess the People's Liberation Army's true combat capability. Do the flashy platforms showcased in propaganda videos actually function in real warfare, or are they merely paper tigers? The fifth cause is reports of a mysterious type of weapon the U.S. used in Venezuela. According to the account of a surviving bodyguard, America's Delta Force used a technology never before seen or heard of, capable of emitting extremely powerful energy waves. Venezuelan soldiers reportedly suffered nosebleeds, vomited blood, felt as if their heads were exploding from within, and lost all ability to move. Hundreds of Venezuelan gunmen were allegedly taken out of the fight, while the U.S. suffered no losses. Military experts say this resembles a directed energy weapon or an acoustic weapon, such as a high-power, military-grade LRAD-type device. This event sent strategic messages that Beijing could not ignore. Namely, the United States can disable an adversary's command system in the opening seconds and simultaneously paralyze radar electronic systems and human operators. More frightening still, this mysterious weapon could cause physical and psychological collapse from a distance without direct engagement, delivering highly effective suppression. It appears the U.S. does not need to show its full power. Merely revealing a portion of its technology can generate severe psychological pressure on opponents. The surviving bodyguard reportedly exclaimed, "I issue a warning to anyone who thinks they can confront the United States. They don't know what America can do. After what I witnessed with my own eyes, I never want to stand on the opposite side again." This warning, along with the successive collapses of leaders in the pro-Beijing axis, would certainly have a significant impact on PLA generals. A fear of war makes them calculate escape routes, or even consider reversing their guns if pushed onto the battlefield. Therefore, on the Iran issue, Beijing only dares to offer verbal support, issuing vague diplomatic statements without any substantive action. And finally, the deepest reason China remains inert lies within its own domestic economy. If Xi risks committing fully to save Iran, the danger of a complete U.S. decoupling becomes real. China's economic ship is already wavering. If that happens, opposition factions could seize the moment to link up and create upheaval inside Zhongnanhai itself. The nightmare scenario, the rear catches fire, is the outcome Xi wants to avoid at all costs. Therefore, lying flat may be the most suitable option for Beijing in the current overall situation. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States has, in fact, cast a multi-layered net. Military deterrence through superior technology, financial strangulation through tariffs, and isolation of the opponent's allies through psychological warfare. And we do not yet know how much tighter this net may become. The Iranian people may not immediately see a U.S. carrier strike group appearing at their doorstep, but they will feel the heat of the conflict through prices rising by the hour and the collapse of the national currency. The help President Trump promised is coming from multiple directions. Tehran's decisions in the coming days will not only determine the fate of a regime, they may also redraw the power map of an entire Middle East for decades to come. That concludes today's program. We invite you to share your personal views in the comments below.